The Texas sky didn't look right that evening. Dark clouds were rolling in fast, and the air had that heavy feeling right before a storm hits. But Victoria wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was too busy ruling her world from the driver's seat. Victoria was the kind of woman who had everything figured out: a successful career, a sharp mind, and a schedule so full there wasn't room for surprises. She was on the phone, giving orders, barely watching the clouds pile up overhead. Then the rain came, hard and fast, the way Texas storms always do. Visibility dropped in seconds. The road ahead turned into a gray wall of water. That's when she saw something on the shoulder: hazard lights blinking through the downpour. A small, old car, completely broken down, and standing beside it, soaking wet, was a woman. Victoria's first thought was to keep driving. She had somewhere to be, somewhere important. But something made her slow down. Maybe it was the way the woman looked so alone out there, so small against that huge, stormy sky. She pulled over. The woman's name was Rachel. And the moment Victoria looked at her face, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Rachel wasn't complaining. She wasn't asking for pity. She was just quietly doing what she had to do. Turns out, Rachel had been coming back from her second job that night. 2 jobs, kids waiting at home, and now this. Victoria stood there in the pouring rain, her expensive shoes sinking into the gravel, her hair completely ruined. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't care about any of that. Something about Rachel's quiet dignity made all of Victoria's usual priorities feel very, very small. She made a decision right there in the storm, and that decision, it was about to change both of their lives. The tow truck finally showed up, lights cutting through the rain. Victoria had stayed the whole time. She hadn't planned to, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. And in those 30 minutes, standing on the side of a wet Texas highway, she learned more about Rachel than she knew about most people in her life. Rachel had 3 kids at home waiting for her. She'd lost her husband 2 years ago, a workplace accident. Just like that, he was gone. Since then, Rachel had been holding everything together on her own: 2 jobs, 3 kids, 1 small house. No complaints. She talked about her children the way only a parent can, with that mix of love and quiet worry that never really goes away. One was chasing a big dream, another was pouring his heart into sports, and the youngest still didn't fully understand why Daddy hadn't come home. Victoria didn't say much. She just listened, and that felt strange to her because Victoria was always the one talking. Then Rachel turned the question around. She asked Victoria about her own life. Simple, genuine curiosity, no agenda. Victoria paused. She thought about her apartment, how quiet it was every night, how she'd traded certain things for success without ever really deciding to. She gave a short answer. Rachel didn't push. That was the thing about Rachel. She never pushed. She just listened back. Then the mechanic walked over and delivered the news. Fixable, but not cheap. Victoria watched Rachel's face for just a second, that flash of worry that she quickly covered up with composure. Rachel asked how long she had to figure it out, and Victoria didn't even think about it. She just stepped forward. Rachel said no, immediately, firmly, proudly, but Victoria wasn't backing down either. What happened next was one of those quiet moments that doesn't look like much from the outside. 2 women standing in the drizzle, neither one willing to give in, except one of them was fighting to help, and the other was fighting to keep her dignity. Victoria found a way to make them both feel okay about it, and somewhere in the glow of distant city lights, something in her was already starting to shift. Rachel's eyes filled up. She reached out and touched Victoria's arm, like she needed to make sure this was real. Victoria didn't look away, and in that moment, something passed between them that didn't need many words. The mechanic got to work. Victoria made another decision. She offered to drive Rachel home. Rachel said it was too far out of the way. Victoria said she didn't mind. And somehow, just like that, they were both walking toward the BMW. Rachel paused before getting in. She looked at Victoria with an expression that was hard to describe. Grateful, yes, but also a little overwhelmed, like she wasn't used to people just showing up for her. The drive was quiet at first. Then it wasn't. Conversation came easier than either of them expected, the kind of easy talk that surprises you when it happens with someone you just met. They passed through neighborhoods that got smaller and simpler the further they went, until Rachel pointed at a little blue house on a quiet street. That's home. Victoria pulled in and sat for a moment. The house was modest, no question about that, but the flower beds were tended, the lawn was clean, the porch light was on. It looked like someone cared deeply about that place. Rachel invited her in for coffee, just a small gesture, the only thing she had to offer. Victoria almost said no. She had a long evening behind her and an even longer to-do list waiting, but she looked at Rachel's face and said yes. Before they even reached the front door, it swung open. 3 kids came tumbling out. Victoria recognized them instantly from everything Rachel had described. The oldest, calm and composed beyond her years, the middle one, all restless energy, trying to play it cool, and the youngest didn't waste a single second. She ran straight into her mother's arms.
The kids had been worried. It had been a long night for them, too. Rachel held her youngest close and then turned to introduce Victoria. The oldest stepped forward first, steady handshake, direct eye contact, a quiet thank you that carried real weight. The middle one hung back a little, watching, thinking, and the youngest had already made up her mind about Victoria completely. She grabbed her hand. She had things to show her, important things, a fish with a very important name. Rachel laughed, a real, full laugh, and Victoria smiled in a way she hadn't in a long time. The inside of the house stopped Victoria for a moment. It was small, simply furnished, nothing expensive or fancy, but it was spotless, and everywhere she looked there was something that made it feel alive. A drawing on the wall, a photo on a shelf, little signs that said people here loved each other. Rachel got the coffee going. The kids filled the silence. Sophie climbed right up next to Victoria on the sofa like they were old friends, started talking immediately. School, her fish, everything. Then she stopped and asked Victoria something direct, the way only a little kid can. Victoria answered honestly, and Sophie thought about it for a second, very seriously, the way children do. Then she said something so simple that it landed harder than anything Victoria had heard in a boardroom in years. Rachel came back with coffee and mismatched mugs, apologizing like it wasn't enough. Victoria wrapped both hands around that chipped mug and meant it when she said it was perfect. The conversation turned to Emma, and the moment Emma started talking about her future, Victoria leaned in. Because what Emma wanted to do with her life, Victoria hadn't heard anyone say anything like that in a very long time. Emma reminded her of someone Victoria used to know pretty well. The evening kept going. Nobody rushed it. Victoria helped with homework, heard about an upcoming game, talked books with a teenager who spoke about characters like they were real people worth standing up for. Emma said something that stopped the whole room. Just one quiet sentence, but it hit Victoria somewhere deep. By the time she stood up to leave, Sophie had already made her feelings very clear. Victoria looked at all 4 of them standing there, and she said something she genuinely meant. The drive home was quiet, just her and her thoughts. She rode the elevator up to her apartment and caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection. Perfect clothes, perfect hair, empty eyes. She stepped inside. The apartment was silent, beautiful, cold, and for the first time, she really felt it. She poured a glass of wine and stood at the window. The city looked beautiful from up there. It always did. But tonight, the apartment felt different, like walking through a place nobody actually lived in. She thought about a small blue house on Maple Street, about bedtime routines and tucked-in kids, and a mother who never stopped giving. Her phone buzzed. Work stuff. The usual urgency. She looked at the message for a long moment. Then she set the phone down and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time she got close, something pulled her back. A face in the rain, a small hand in hers, a question asked by a child who didn't know how heavy it would land. Morning came and she went through her routine. Coffee, news, schedule, emails. All of it felt like she was playing a role she'd memorized a long time ago.
At the office, her assistant noticed before Victoria even sat down. "Something's different," she said. "You okay?" Victoria asked her something she'd never asked before, something personal. The assistant answered honestly, and then, because Victoria kept asking, she said something a little more honest than that. 5 years, that's how long they'd worked together, and this was the first real conversation they'd ever had. Victoria sat with that for a while. That afternoon, she got in her car. She told herself she had a reason, a practical one, but really, she just needed to see them again. She found Rachel outside, doing something ordinary, something simple, and somehow that simple thing looked more meaningful than anything Victoria had done all week. Rachel looked up and smiled like the visit was the best part of her day. Then the front door flew open, and a little girl in a school uniform came running across the yard, backpack bouncing behind her, calling Victoria's name like she'd been waiting all day to say it. The little girl didn't slow down for a second. She had things to show Victoria, important things. Mr. Bubbles had apparently learned something remarkable since yesterday. Victoria caught her mid-run and laughed, a real laugh, the kind that catches you off guard. Emma and Jake were on the porch, both of them genuinely happy to see her, and Victoria felt that warmth again, the one she was starting to recognize. The car was fixed, running well. Rachel said it with such relief that Victoria felt it too. Inside, the afternoon just happened. Fish tricks, an essay about justice, basketball in the backyard from a kid who'd gone from quiet to completely comfortable almost overnight. Then Rachel said to stay for dinner. Victoria's first instinct was to say no. She had the usual reasons lined up, but she looked around the room and said yes. Dinner was simple, loud, full of stories from all directions at once. Victoria talked too, and she noticed she kept coming back to the cases that actually meant something, the ones where a real person walked away better off. Jake said something toward the end of the meal that she wasn't expecting, an invitation, completely earnest, the kind only a kid can extend. She said yes to that too. When it was time to leave, Emma walked her out. She said something quiet, just a few sentences, but they followed Victoria all the way home. She drove thinking about two women who were both, in their own way, a little lonely, and how differently they'd each tried to fill that space. Saturday came. Victoria stood in a sporting goods store, completely out of her element, trying to make a decision she'd never had to make before. She changed outfits 3 times before leaving the house. The baseball field was nothing like her usual weekend. Bleachers, coolers, folding chairs, and the kind of easy neighborhood energy she hadn't been around in years. She felt out of place climbing those aluminum steps. Then she heard her name. Rachel was waving from the 3rd row, a spot saved right beside her. Victoria settled in, found Jake in the dugout almost immediately. Uniform a little big, face absolutely glowing. Rachel leaned over and told her he'd barely talked about anything else all week. Victoria smiled and watched the field. She was exactly where she'd said she'd be. The warm-up hadn't even finished, and Victoria was already feeling it. That thing in the air at a game like this. Everyone cheering for everyone, not just their own kid, all of them. She'd never been part of something like that before. Then Jake took the mound. Victoria didn't expect to feel nervous, but she did. She didn't expect to jump to her feet either, but she did that too. Rachel laughed beside her. Victoria didn't even care. Jake had a great day. His team won, and when he came running over after the final handshakes, Victoria hugged him like it was the most natural thing in the world. He wanted to know if she'd seen a specific moment, one pitch in particular. She had, and she told him exactly what she thought of it. Ice cream followed, a sticky, loud, wonderful booth at a local parlor. Nothing fancy. Best dessert she'd had in years. Then Sophie asked a question with chocolate on her chin and zero hesitation. Rachel tried to give Victoria an easy way out. Victoria didn't take it. Sophie's reaction turned heads across the whole parlor. On the way to the cars, Jake walked beside her, dropped his usual energy for just a moment, said something quietly and sincerely. Victoria told him the truth right back. That evening, she tried to work, couldn't quite get there. Then her phone rang, a name she knew well, a voice that was already tense before she said hello. There was a problem, a real one by any professional measure. Her partner wanted to know where she'd been. She told him. Silence on the other end. Victoria listened to the full situation. She said she'd handle it, but something in her voice was different, and he noticed. After she hung up, she sat by the window. The skyline looked the same as always, but the questions she was sitting with were new ones. Monday came in fast and loud. Conference room, colleagues, pressure, the familiar machinery of her career spinning back up. Victoria sat at the table, and her mind was somewhere else entirely. Her partner said her name, Sharp, twice. Her partner asked her to walk the room through her own work. She looked down at the pages in front of her. She knew every word on them. She'd written them. Technically, they were airtight. But sitting there in that moment, they felt like something she didn't fully recognize anymore. She gave her answer. Flat, correct, hollow. Then her phone buzzed. One text, a few words, but it pulled her completely out of that room. She stood up, walked out. Her partner called after her. She kept walking. She made a call, asked one question. Then she made a decision that would have been unthinkable to her just a few weeks ago. She got in our car. Emma was dressed carefully, every detail attended to. You could tell it mattered. She was nervous in the way that only happens when something is really, truly important. Victoria sat across from her at the kitchen table and listened first. Then she got to work. Not lawyer Victoria, not corporate Victoria, just someone who saw a young woman who deserved a real shot and knew exactly how to help her get ready. They went through it all, question by question, answer by answer. Victoria watched something shift in Emma over that hour. The shakiness settled, the voice got steadier, the words got cleaner. By the end, Emma sounded exactly like who she already was. Victoria's phone had been going off the whole time. She hadn't looked at it once. When she finally checked, the number of missed calls and messages told her everything about what was waiting back downtown. She said goodbye, got in the car, drove back. The city looked the same as always, but the urgency that used to pull her forward felt different now, smaller somehow. She walked into her partner's office. He didn't hold back. She let him finish. Then she said two words, quiet, calm, certain. And the look on his face said he had absolutely no idea who he was talking to anymore. She looked up.
Her partner said the number out loud like it would change everything. Victoria looked around his office slowly. The awards, the framed photos, the carefully chosen art. She had wanted all of this once, worked for it, built toward it for years. Standing there now, it felt like someone else's room. She said something that surprised even herself. He asked what had gotten into her. She didn't have a simple answer, but she gave him an honest one. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down, read the message, and felt something so full and bright in her chest that the entire office, the deal, the pressure, all of it just fell away. She told Richard she needed time off. He looked at her like she'd said something in another language. She didn't wait for his response. She walked out past all of it. The conference room, the reception desk, the fresh flowers nobody ever really noticed. She stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, something lifted. 3 months passed. Victoria was standing in a school parking lot on a weeknight, watching families file through the front doors. Her car was different, her address was different, her work was different. Everything had changed. Not all of it easily, some of it had cost her quite a bit. But then she walked into that auditorium, and a little girl spotted her from the stage. That face, that moment, worth every single thing. She slipped into her seat. Rachel on one side, Emma on the other, home from her first semester, already full of stories and plans and that fire that never seemed to dim. The performance was joyful, imperfect, completely wonderful. Victoria cried and didn't try to hide it. Afterward, pizza, the usual spot, worn booths and familiar faces and servers who knew everyone's order. Victoria had grown to love these evenings more than she could have predicted. Emma asked about the new case.
Victoria talked about it the way she used to talk about the big corporate wins, except this time the stakes were someone's family, someone's children. Jake said something that caught her off guard. The admiration in his voice was so genuine, it almost undid her. She caught Rachel's eye across the table. No words needed. Later, on the porch, quiet evening, the sun going down slow, Rachel turned to her with a look Victoria had learned to take seriously. She said she had a question, and she wanted the real answer. Victoria waited. Rachel asked her something that cut right to the heart of everything. Victoria took her time answering. She thought about the apartment, the silence, the wins that never quite felt like enough. Then she gave Rachel the most honest answer she had. Rachel listened. Then she said something that surprised Victoria a little. She admitted she used to look at people like Victoria and feel envy, the career, the money, the confidence. But watching her these past few months had quietly changed that. Victoria shook her head. She told Rachel she had never been the one with it figured out. That had always been Rachel, living close to what actually mattered, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. They sat quietly for a while after that, watching the street, dogs on leashes, kids on bikes, neighbors waving from driveways. This was Victoria's world now. Then Rachel said there was something else. Victoria turned, and Rachel, a little nervous, a little hopeful, told her about something she'd been quietly thinking about for herself, a new direction, something that had been sitting in the back of her mind, waiting for the right moment. Victoria felt something light up in her chest. She told Rachel exactly what she thought, no softening, no hesitation. Rachel smiled, but admitted she was scared. Victoria stopped her right there, said what she needed to hear, meant every word. Rachel asked if she'd help her get started. Victoria said she would be honored, and she meant that too. The porch light glowed warm around them as the evening settled in. Victoria sat there and thought about how strange and quiet and perfect the road had been to get here. 6 months ago, she was driving past people without seeing them, moving fast, staying focused, keeping her world very small and very controlled. Now she was here, planning, helping, belonging. She said thank you out of nowhere. Rachel asked what for. Victoria told her, for the broken down car, for letting a stranger in, for showing her without ever trying to what a full life actually looks like. Rachel squeezed her hand, said her own thank you back, for stopping, for seeing her, for becoming part of something neither of them had planned. Victoria looked at the little blue house, the warm windows, the yard she'd watched Rachel tend with quiet, steady love. Somewhere behind her, the lights of Dallas glittered on the horizon. She used to feel pulled toward them. She didn't anymore. She had stopped on the side of a rainy road one ordinary evening, and somehow, without planning any of it, she had found her way all the way home.